All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Friday, day part of the free for all, and I try to take a day off from doing those thumbnails. I try to put some effort and energy into, kind of tell you what the program is about. Fridays, I just use that standard issue, the free for all with the melee that I believe, or melee, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, during the New York City draft riots. It's a NAST cartoon, I believe, that we use, and quite interesting. So if you want me to do individual thumbnails, I know I've got a consultant who's giving me some advice, an advisor who wants me to do new thumbnails every time, and I'm just, no. All right, 240-242-5646. Hope you'll join me. We did have a shorter program yesterday for two reasons. One, I did have a 1 p.m. appointment. I had sharp it was set, and the person was here actually at 12:45. Heard of them knocking on the door, so I closed off at 1, but also because we had some gremlins in the system, and I figured out what the problem was. And anyway, it's always frustrating. Those little technical bugs drive me friggin' crazy. We're going to kind of revisit stories, I should say, that we addressed earlier in the week. That's what we often do on the free for all. And also, I do hope you'll join me. Haven't had calls lately. We are seeing again the ticking up of subscribers in our base, which is wonderful. Some of the programs getting pretty good. What is the word I'm looking for? Pretty good click rates as well, but still not seeing that growth. I want to see 500. I want to see 1,000. I want to see 10,000 subscribers. And maybe I will, and maybe I won't. I'd like to see a lot of things. I'd like to have a 2,500 rating on chess.com. That ain't never going to happen. But I can always live in hope of 1,000 plus subscribers, maybe even more. 240-242-5646. Again, we do something pretty unique here. That's why I have that optimism. Really are focused, I think, more than other programs on building a progressive, or I would say, well, let's say progressive coalition, but a progressive populist one where we're uniting workers, people, and those who have the interests of workers at heart, trying to take on the billionaire class and come up with solutions together. I don't really see that in other programs. So many others are really, truly partisan, Democratic, Republican, something or the other. We're neither. More certainly leaning towards leaning hard left. But that doesn't really mean Democrats. 240-242-5646. And the policies that we espouse here, some of them are at least more embraced by some Republican leaders, such as getting out of Israel, stopping our support for the genocide. We're seeing some Republican leaders, such as Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey in the House, who are more outspoken against Israel than even the boldest, and I use that term loosely, Democrats like AOC. All right. We always do, we don't always, we usually center Gaza from Al Jazeera today live. Israel vows to destroy all Hamas tunnels in Gaza as attacks continue. This is during a ceasefire, right? During the announced ceasefire, the attacks continue. Interesting, Rashida Tlaib, Congresswoman from Detroit. She's from Michigan, maybe not Detroit, but outside Detroit, from Michigan. The Minnesotan is Ilhan Omar. So Tlaib saying, hey, there's no ceasefire. I don't know what they're talking about. There's no such thing as a ceasefire right now. You see that Al Jazeera is highlighting negotiations are underway to allow 150 Hamas fighters who are trapped in tunnels in southern Gaza to be freed and allowed safe passage into the area that is supposedly controlled by Palestinians, not Israel. We'll see if that happens. And Trump is saying, I haven't really talked a lot about what Trump says or the news because it's so fluid and you can't really believe anybody, what they tell you, certainly no one on the U.S. or Israeli side of the divide. But Trump is saying that he does expect a U.S. coordinated international stabilization force to be on the ground in Gaza soon. Let's hope that. It would probably be better. It has to be better than what we have now with Israel and pretty much in charge. One other point, just want to show you the casualty because Tlaib is saying, hey, there's no ceasefire whatsoever. And I think it's fair. Israel continues to attack. It's fair for her to say that, continues to attack Lebanon, continues to violate international law, stealing land from the West Bank Palestinians. So Israel is a terrible actor. But if you look at the one thing I want to say here, that if you look at that death count, Israel's war in Gaza has killed at least 68,875 Palestinians. That's the identical number that we presented to you Wednesday. So unless Al Jazeera has failed to update in 2 days, and that's the exact number Al Jazeera presented, we haven't seen more death rain down on Gaza by Israel in 2 days. So that is quite a change from what we saw previously in the past 2 years since October 7. So that is something to be cautiously optimistic about. Let's hope it continues. 240-242-5646. Again, would love to talk to you. I did test out the phones, and they are working. I will check in both on Facebook and YouTube just to see if there are comments, and I'm not seeing any right now, but I do get those periodically. The chat, which I love to see. By the way, hey Maria, good to see you there in the chat. And if you want to join me, please do call in 240-242-5646. Throw me a vine. Would love to get it. So this is going to be filed in the do what I say, not what I do category. This is a cartoon, I guess you call it a cartoon, I posted in Halitics on Facebook. And by the way, yeah, join us on Halitics. Would love to see you in our group there. And I saw this on another friend's page, and I decided to post it because it does kind of, I think, fairly capture the response to Mayor-elect Mamdani from a certain portion of the MAGA group. And you can see that cartoon. I used to have a guy posting in Halitics on our page there, and I actually had to ban him because there was just too many personal attacks, attacks on individuals within the group, including yours truly, that caused me to have to ban them. But they used to post MAGA, I guess, pro-MAGA, MAGA-style cartoons, and that you see it there, the Make America Great Again. And so you see Mamdani saying, why do you have free buses and affordable groceries? The irony there, yeah, New York City has fallen. Like, oh my God, how awful. Free buses and affordable groceries, that's going to destroy the city. And I thought there was a truth to that. I am seeing a lot of the right really seemingly unhinged by the Mamdani campaign. But I also think it was a little bit unfair. The attacks on Mamdani haven't come exclusively, I don't even think largely, from MAGA, as much as they've come from Trump supporters, if you will. They certainly have come from Trump himself, right? Trump is clearly very, very uncomfortable, right, with Mamdani's win. That it makes him a little bit crazy, just as he was terrified, and we know this from his tweets and from comments after the 2016 election. He was very afraid he was going to have to run against Bernie. He thought Bernie would beat him. He said, hey, Bernie had some of the same, was arguing for some of the same solutions to America's problems as I was. For example, Trump even did say at one point he supported universal health care in 2016. He knew Bernie was a more credible voice of the working class than he was. He also knew that running against Hillary Clinton was a gift that would keep on giving. And Trump was very, very pleased to run against a neo-lib, neocon, a warmonger like Hillary, who had supported the war on Iraq. Trump had been opposed to it much earlier than most, and certainly long before Hillary even grudgingly acknowledged that was a mistake. Hillary's neo-lib policies, her championing of the omnibus crime bill, her support for most favored nation status for China, her belief in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. She was for it before she was against it. She supported the Keystone XL pipeline. All of those policies made it very easy for Trump to run. His most right-wing views really weren't much different than hers. And he was better, I think, certainly on war, he at that time appeared better than she did. So he was very fortunate to run against Hillary. He knew that a real socialist, a democratic socialist like Bernie would have advantages against him. A billionaire, somebody who's, had never evinced any real populist views whatsoever. So he was afraid of Bernie. He was afraid he would lose to Bernie. And now he sees a Mamdani who, with the reins of New York City in his hand, has the opportunity to really make life better for poor, struggling, and working people in a way that Trump promised to do, but didn't. And so, of course, Trump is very much opposed to Mamdani. But the Trump supporters, the MAGA, don't all oppose Mamdani. In fact, he got a lot of support from many of the same people who disproportionately, at least compared to other Republicans, supported Trump. Young men, especially young white men, young black men, young Latino men, all supported Trump in a disproportionate number than they normally support Republicans. Of course, white men, young white men, I believe a significant majority supported Trump. And that was a greater majority than previous Republican candidates had enjoyed. Likewise, I believe Latino men, by a majority, at least the exit polls suggest they supported Trump, which was not the case in previous elections. Republican presidential candidates did not enjoy a majority of votes from Latino men. So you could see, and black men also not a majority, but a higher percentage than the past. So you could see that those are the same voters, though, that supported Mamdani. You can see why Trump would be afraid that Mamdani could win by putting great policies in place that make life better for people in New York City, who will then perhaps be more willing to support Democrats, at least if they're progressive populist Democrats, people like Graham Plattner. If the party moves away from the Schumer-Jeffries model, which we can only hope. The Pelosi retiring now, right? She's retiring today. So you're seeing another neo-lib go down. If the party truly does move hard left in terms of economics, that's a death knell, not just for the Republican Party, but of course for the neo-libs and the Dem Party too, for the billionaire class control. And that's what they're really, really afraid of. So this is kind of unfair, that cartoon. It kind of mocks the MAGA voter. And it's this. So again, this is the do what I say, not what I do. We're trying to build a coalition here. We're trying to build a movement of all poor, struggling, working, and middle-class people who recognize that the current economic system is wrong. It's unjust. It's morally and intellectually bankrupt. Now, that said, there are, and I want to respond to them, I believe these are, I guess they're MAGA people. I'm not really sure. I think one of them is. I do know that. I try not to identify people when I call them out, although one I will, because they posted on Halitics YouTube, and you can find it really easily. You can find all this on Facebook, by the way, also, or at least the Facebook post. But I didn't see any reason not to show their name. But here you go. 2 comments, one from YouTube, one from Facebook. And I just wanted to respond to those as well because I was intrigued by these. These are, I believe, MAGA supporters who actually really don't like Mamdani and think he's going to be a bad mayor. And hope he's a bad. That's what I really don't get is you can think he's going to be a bad mayor, but to hope he'll be a bad mayor. So in 2 years, I'll get to point and laugh at you at the disaster New York will be. Can't wait. And so let me just respond to that person. I don't get that. Why would you want New York to collapse? Mamdani's policies are targeted to help poor, struggling, and working people. Now, maybe they won't. I myself have raised some questions, some doubts, some skepticism about rent freezes. I don't think they're ideal. But on balance, I think he is definitely moving the city, or will move. I hope he will move. We don't know. I hope he will move the city in the right direction, and I want him to succeed. I want things to get better. Why would you laugh if New York becomes a disaster? It seems to me that would be something to be sorry about. You know, people would say, well, you don't want Trump to succeed. And I guess I would say, well, I think Trump's policies in many ways hurt our country terribly. And if the economy gets stronger for a week or a month or a year, that could help him win re-election. But I don't think that's in America's best interest long term, because his policies aren't reducing inequality. They aren't addressing the most serious problems we face. They're exacerbating them: the climate catastrophe, genocide. Trump's not addressing those, just as Kamala did not address those. But, you know, Mamdani is addressing those issues. I don't know to the extent he's going to fight for environmental justice, but he is going to fight for to oppose inequality. He is going to fight for working people. He said that, or he promises to. I hope he does. I don't see how it's bad if Mamdani enacts democratic socialism and it helps people in New York City. That seems to me a good thing. And then the next person wrote, you would actually be quite surprised how many of us wanted him to win. It's the only way for Americans to finally realize how terrible socialism is. I'll check back with you in 2 years to see how New York is doing. And again, same attitude. I don't really understand that. And the claim, well, socialism is so terrible, and yet we see it work extremely well. We also see this rapacious crony capitalism that we have now work extremely poorly. How our country is sliding deeper and deeper into the abyss because of the control that the capitalists have, because we don't have a tight safety net, because we don't have a vibrant government sector to stand up to take on and to act as a counterweight to the oligarchs and the monopolists. So I really do find it odd that somebody would root for Mamdani to fail, unless they're a billionaire, right? Unless they're, an elite, unless Mamdani's policies are targeted against them. But I don't think the people who made those posts are those folks. I don't think they're the people who are, going to actually have to pay higher taxes as a result of Mamdani's policies or won't benefit from them. So I find those posts somewhat odd. By the way, hey, Splash, good to see you in the YouTube chat as well. All right, so let's move on. Again, I find the hope that he will fail odd. In fact, even with regard to Trump, I don't want his economic policies, at least to the extent they're talking about slashing taxes on the wealthy. I don't want those to succeed in the short run. I think in the long run, they'll be disastrous for our country. I know they will be. The rich need to pay higher taxes, not lower taxes. But when it comes to, say, getting out of Ukraine, I wanted Trump to succeed. I wanted us to get out of Ukraine. I wanted him to promote peace with Russia. That hasn't worked out. I'm not happy that hasn't worked out. I wanted Trump's tariffs to succeed. I wanted him to impose really, wise trade policies that would target the countries that employ workers at the lowest wages, that take on union leaders and kill them, that don't enforce any kind of environmental standards. I want tariffs on those countries. So even though I have huge problems with Trump, when the policies are policies I agree with, I want those to succeed. So I don't really get this desire for Mamdani to fail. 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. Now, the comic that I posted where I go after the MAGA folk, I was very clear why I have a problem with that. And I actually corrected myself, and I do want to share my correction because I want us to work together. And that post does just the opposite. It goes after not the Republican elites, not the billionaires who are the cause of our problems, but voters who I think are generally doing what they think is best for themselves and their families. And I can't be opposed to that. So I took it back. I wrote, the post is somewhat unfair, if not significantly so. A lot of the opposition to Mamdani didn't come from MAGA at all. It came from Dem Center Right, Schumer, Hillary, financial robber barons. That's not MAGA. Jamie Dimon. He may have voted for Hillary. He never said. Bill Ackman, I think, was a former Democrat as well. Trump is a robber baron as well. So they all can't stand the idea that their taxes might have to go up. They might have to pay their fair share, and that their extraordinary control, unprecedented plutocratic control might go away. And again, as I said earlier, many of the same demographic who voted disproportionately for Trump, whites, Latinos, and black men also voted for Mamdani. So I'm not going to go after MAGA. But the attitude that we want Mamdani's socialistic policies to fail is found among some MAGA and maybe many. And I just don't get it. It seems to me that you should want it to succeed. Maybe you don't believe in it. You don't think it's going to work. But wouldn't you be happy if it did? Wouldn't it be great if, say, universal single-payer healthcare was somehow provided, at least to some degree, in Manhattan? Wouldn't it be awesome? Because that's socialism. People say he's a socialist. Well, socialism is government control of functions, various functions in society, various services. So wouldn't it be great if he was able to somehow push through some type of government-provided healthcare that made life better for millions of New Yorkers? Wouldn't it be great if those government-run grocery stores in the food deserts of Harlem, of the South Bronx, of Bed-Stuy, wouldn't it be great if they provided healthy, nutritious, I guess that's two words that mean the same thing, nutritious foods? Wouldn't that be wonderful, affordable? So I don't know why you'd be opposed to it. And we got from Splash, haters gonna hate. Yeah, I get it. It's unfortunate, though. 240-242-5646. So I made that point, and I got this response. I want to just keep sharing it from, I think they're MAGA, at least they seem to show some affinity with MAGA, that I said, hey, look, some of the same demographics that supported Trump supported Mamdani. And so here was the response. The main reason is Cuomo was his primary opponent. No one wanted that grimy murderer back in office. I don't disagree. And I said that very first thing. I made that point. You know what? Mamdani drew an inside straight going up against Eric Adams and Mario Cuomo. I mean, you talk about being able to pick the best possible opponents. I think that's true. I note that. But I also think there's more going on. Young men voted for Trump because they believed him when he said that he would change things for the better, right? And it was easy for Trump to campaign as the candidate of change, right? With tariffs, getting us out. I mean, there were specific ways he was going to change things, get us out of Ukraine, right? He didn't say much about Israel, but remember, Harris's take was, oh no, we're going to do exactly the same thing when it comes to Israel. So if you wanted a change in our policy, our Zionist policy, if you wanted to change, you sure as heck weren't going to vote for Harris because she made it clear there weren't going to be no change. If you wanted to change when it came to endless war with Russia, endless proxy war with Russia, well, Trump was your guy because Harris said she wasn't going to change anything. So even if you want to change when it came to border policies, and I think Biden got a raw deal there a little bit with the border, but leaving that aside, if you wanted change and there was good reason to want change in 24, then you would vote for Trump. I mean, I would say you should vote for Jill Stein, but obviously if you see your choice limited to Harris, Trump, and your life has gotten worse over the past 4 years, or it hasn't gotten better, and you've seen people that you don't think deserve to have billions of dollars get ever richer, then maybe you would vote for Trump. I think that exact same dynamic was in play in New York City. People looked at how the city has become a playground for the billionaires, how the city is great if you've got, hundreds of millions of dollars in your bank account, and sucks if you're anybody else. And they wanted change. And that's why the same people who got it in the neck over the past 20, 30, 40 years under both Democratic and Republican leadership chose Trump in 2016 and 24. Those same people, many of them voted for Mamdani. Hey, Ari, good to see you. Better fair taxes than insane tariffs. Yeah, well, I think high taxes on the rich, but also, tariffs on goods that are made with cheap foreign exploited labor. That's always been my view. I haven't seen good reason or any reason to change it. So again, to the extent I was shaming or mocking MAGA voters as opposed to the policies of the Trump administration, Trump himself, that is not what I believe in doing. That was a mistake to a degree, and I want to be very, very clear. Yeah, I do think MAGA has gotten a lot of it wrong, no question about it, but it's No more so wrong than Democratic elites. And this we go back to revisit. We do it on the free-for-all here. We go back over the week. What if Trump is weaker than we think? We talked about this with Arlen Tuesday. And Hartman had just such a terrible, terrible take there, explaining, in the worst possible way why Trump won. He says he promised he'd make life miserable for blacks, Hispanics, women, queer people, academics, and people living in big cities. So that's how Hartman copes with Trump's win, right? Is that Trump's supporters were sadists. They wanted life to get worse for other people. I reject that. I don't buy that. I think that's an absurd take. In fact, it runs directly counter to the voting that we saw, where black men broke towards Trump in a way that they hadn't for other Republican presidents or presidential candidates. Hispanics broke more for Trump than we've seen even when George W. Bush was running for president. The queer people, Trump had his criticism of the trans movement. I think people feel that it had gone too far in certain aspects. Academics, I have a real problem with the way Trump went after colleges and universities. But don't forget, Biden and Harris were also defending schools like Columbia, UCLA that were attacking pro-Palestine protesters. And then he says people living in big cities, right? You don't like the way Trump treats big cities, but do you like the way that Schumer, for example, just refused to vote or to say he was going to vote for Mamdani? I mean, it's the same exact criticism that you would have against Trump. So Hartman with a terrible take, Hartman attacking Trump voters rather than trying to win them over. And that's exactly what we're trying not to do here. And sometimes I fail. I do the best I can. Sometimes I fail. 240-242-5646. Yesterday, I played significant portions of Mamdani's victory speech with great approbation. I thought they were excellent. Now I'm going to play a segment I wasn't so thrilled with. Now, in retrospect, I don't think it was terrible. When I first heard it, I didn't like it. I didn't even realize he had said this until after the fact. I think I was listening to Charlemagne, the God. I don't know, does he go by the God anymore? I never see it. I just see Charlemagne, which is I like better than just throwing in the God part, but whatever. I liked what Charlemagne had to say. He was going after Van Jones. Van Jones critical of Mamdani's speech for being too divisive. If anything, I thought it was too, and I said yesterday, I liked the fact that he was breaking the populace down into the haves and everybody else and saying, hey, everybody else, white, black, Latino, Asian, doesn't matter. We're all in it together against the elites, right? I love that. But he had a segment in there I didn't love when I heard it. By the way, Van Jones thought it was too divisive. I like that kind of divisiveness. I support divisiveness that divides people within classes. So in other words, we fight together because our economic interests are the same, even if we look different, even if we have different skin color, we come from different countries, we worship different gods. That's fine. We should all be together to demand a fair deal from the billionaires and demand that they give back, they disgorge some of their ill-gotten gains. That's the kind of divisiveness I love. The kind of divisiveness I hate is where you pit people against each other, as Mamdani said, by telling the people making $30 an hour that their problems come from those making $20 an hour. I thought that was a really good comment. Here's one I didn't like so much from Zoran Tuesday night.
And we will build a city hall that stands steadfast alongside Jewish New Yorkers and does not waver in the fight against the scourge of anti-Semitism.
So I have a real problem with that. I mean, there just isn't a scourge of anti-Semitism in New York City. And he brought that up. He mentioned that before he talked about Islamophobia, which is a real problem in New York City. So to say, oh, we've got to fight again. Now, I get why he did it. He's trying to unite people and all that. But it feels off. you're talking about something that isn't a problem. And you're accepting framing by the ADL, by rabbis, by Zionists, that there's this terrible problem with anti-Semitism in New York when there isn't. You're accepting their framing. They only can claim that with even the semblance of a straight face if they conflate legitimate, appropriate, essential criticism of Israel, so-called Jewish state, called that by the rabbis, by ADL. They call it the Jewish state so that when you criticize it, they can claim that you're being anti-Semitic. So I have a problem with what Mamdani did because it does give a little aid and comfort to those who equate falsely anti-Semitism with criticism of Israel, which we must do. But I also have a problem with for another reason. Because to the extent that Mamdani is trying to, I think, blunt the force of attacks against him for being allegedly anti-Semitic, it ain't going to work. The people who hate you, because I don't even think it's because you're Muslim. The people, if you were like an Ayan Hirsi, who's a Muslim woman, or maybe she's left the faith, I don't really know, but people who are very critical of their own religion, Muslims who criticize Islam, they're okay. Nobody's going to have a problem with them. I think the reason they go after Zoran is because he has spoken out, not exaggerating in any way. If anything, he's understated the threat, the Israeli threat. But that's why the Zionist lobby is so dead set against him. And saying, oh yeah, we're going to fight anti-Semitism, that's not going to win over anybody. 240-242-5646. So I have a real problem with that. And you can see that he didn't get anywhere with the Israeli lobby. Here's Major Garrett interviewing Major Garrett with ABC, or no, CBS. I thought he was with ABC, but I guess he's now with CBS. Major Garrett, who I think does a really good job, by the way. He was with Fox. I think he did go to ABC at one point and then moved over to CBS, I suppose. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he was always with CBS after he left Fox. But here he is interviewing ADL chief Jonathan Greenblatt.
Do you take the mayor-elect at his word, and do you look forward to talking to him in the near future?
Well, thank you for having me, Major.
So let me stop it. So his word, remember he just said, we just heard it. I'm going to take on anti-Semitism. We're going to eliminate that scourge. I'm going to work with Jewish leaders. That's what Zoran said. So he's asking Greenblatt here, do you take him at his word? So listen to what this garbage person says.
Your question gets it right. I take him at his words. That's why we're concerned. So look, he is the mayor of this city. We congratulate him.
His concern. So what words? No word. He'll tell you. There's nothing that Zoran has said that should cause anybody who's concerned about Jewish New Yorkers any concerns.
But our concerns are real because of what he has said, not last night in his acceptance speech, but over the years. He has made comments. He has endorsed policies. He has pushed ideas that have endangered Jewish New Yorkers in a time.
No, he can't come up with any examples of that. But listen to the laugh riot that Greenblatt tries to leverage something Zoran said as though it has endangered Jews.
Antisemitism has reached all-time highs.
So before he says anti-Semitism has reached all-time highs, that's completely false. That what we're seeing is ever greater criticism of Israel because Israel's fangs are completely out. No, there's no question whatsoever now that this is a purely genocidal state. And as Ari says in the chat, anti-Israel is anti-genocide. It's not anti-Semitism.
All-time highs. So we launched the Mamdani Monitor in order to track what happens in this administration without bias, without prejudging. We want to see, as you said, who he appoints, what his personnel looks like, what policies he pushes, and what programs he introduces to make sure these keep Jewish New Yorkers safe.
I'm going to stop it there because he gives this load of crap. And I mentioned I like Major Garrett here because he totally ignores Greenblatt's propaganda, his Hasbara, straight from the mouth of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Jonathan, according to the exit polls, 32% of self-identified Jewish voters in New York supported Mayor-elect Mamdani. What, if anything?
I'm going to stop it there for a sec also. So I like the way Garrett's like, hey, you just said a lot of BS. I don't care about it. Why did so many Jews, if he's so bad, why did so many Jews vote for Mamdani? And I feel like it was far too few, right? He only got a third of the Jewish vote. By the way, this goes to that whole point. Was it MAGA that supported, that has the biggest problem with Mamdani? Is it MAGA voters that, because that was the implication in that comic, that cartoon I shared. And it's not true. Jews are incredibly democratic. I would warrant that of the 64% who voted for Cuomo, the great majority of them voted for Harris, right? So it's not like these are MAGA, and yet 2/3 of the Jewish voters chose either Cuomo or Sliwa. A tiny sliver chose Sliwa. So it's not MAGA that's to blame for the anti-Mamdani sentiment. Not at all. And they are reachable. They can be brought into a true progressive populist on economic policies coalition. And that's what we should be trying to do. So yeah, I thought it was far too few who supported Mamdani actually. But when you look at the constant drumbeat against Mamdani from the pulpits in synagogues, from the New York Times, which so many Jews view as their Bible, it is kind of impressive. I think he even got that many Jewish votes.
What does that tell you?
Well, look, these numbers last night were extraordinary. Millions of people voted. And it shouldn't surprise us that a number of young Jewish voters voted for Samim Mamdani. They did that because his message on affordability was very powerful.
It's not just on affordability. Many younger Jews, like this older Jew, find Israel to be abhorrent. And we welcomed his criticism of Israel. That was not a bug, but a feature that made him so much more appealing as a candidate than so many other Democrats.
But at the same time, to be clear, promoting ideas like the BDS movement, which espouses, if you will, or purports to be nonviolent, but actually increases violence.
All right, so the BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions, the Zionist lobby wants to make that absolutely illegal. They're terrified of it because Israel is very, very dependent on exports. People stop buying Israeli goods, whatever, I guess pistachio nuts, olives, whatever, which I really try not to ever do. That's going to hurt Israel a lot. Israel's already suffering. Israeli farmers are really suffering because in Europe, so few European consumers now will buy Israeli goods. This is really hurting the country. And if enough people stop buying Israeli product, then maybe they'll stop voting for Netanyahu. That's what we can hope. This is really frightening to Greenblatt. So rather than acknowledge, hey, this is an effective strategy that is indeed nonviolent. Oh no, this promotes violence against Jews. How? I remember there was a BDS against South Africa in the early 1980s because it was an apartheid regime, just as Israel is now. I don't remember all sorts of outbreaks of violence against South Africans.
Or suggest that he's going to cut ties with the Cornell University facility on Roosevelt Island, not because of the quality of its research, Major, not because of its graduation rates, but because it has a connection to an Israeli university.
Now, I didn't look that up. That seems very odd, seems unlikely, but I support it. Yeah, let's not. I mean, it may well be that a lot of Israeli occupying force veterans are going to that hospital, maybe they're that teaching hospital, that medical school. I really don't know. But again, I'm sure it's no big deal. It's nothing. And why shouldn't they cut ties? He has a right to cut ties with institutions that are tied to the state of Israel. He's at every right, and in fact, I have moral obligation to say, yeah, we're not going to be supporting this institution that is helping promote genocide against the Palestinian people, just as you would want, Greenblatt, I'm certain, institutions in the state of New York to cut ties with German affiliated groups and institutions in the run up to World War II and the Holocaust.
I mean, things like this, or if you will, dignifying the comment, glorify the Intifada, all this makes you
dignified. He said he would discourage its use. But again, globalize the Intifada means let's rise up together against injustice, against occupation. Isn't that what we want to do? Isn't that what Jews often talk about? Let's together defeat evil. That's what globalize the Intifada means. We have to defeat evil.
Who's nervous because of the levels of discrimination, vandalism, and violence we're seeing this morning in
There's none. There was. Now he is going to bring up. Now I know this is true. So I say there's none. I shouldn't say that. Obviously, there's going to be attacks. Are they anti-Semitic? Maybe.
Vandalism and violence we're seeing this morning in Brooklyn. Blood red swastikas were painted all over a Jewish school. Now I will credit Mayor-elect Mamdani called it out on X. That's a good thing.
I mean, that's so amazing because Mamdani says, hey, this is wrong. People shouldn't paint swastikas on schools. But even that attack with the swastikas, and I get it, swastika is obviously a symbol of genocide against Jews. It's true. It's hard for me. Look, I should be totally outraged by it. But I'm much more outraged by the genocide happening right now that Israel is perpetrating than by the lashing out of a powerless person. And Israel has so fetishized the swastika as a symbol of hate. And it's fair to say it is. I get it. But there's something so disproportionate here that we're supposed to all recoil in horror at a swastika. And yet the flag of Israel, which is currently the flag of the genociders, hey, no big deal. Nothing to see here. Move along. Let's show you the video from CBS News here covering this event.
The NYPD is investigating several incidents of anti-Semitic vandalism in Brooklyn, including at a large yeshiva. As Lisa Rosner reports, the school turned the hateful symbols into signs of pride.
All right, so signs of pride. Now, so the hateful symbol is the swastika, right? So they're going to turn those into signs of pride.
Into signs of pride.
Wednesday morning around 6:30, students and staff walked into the Magen David Yeshiva on McDonald Avenue in Gravesend with swastikas on the school's pillars and windows. We are blurring the hateful symbols, which can be triggering for viewers.
Triggering.
My grandchildren over here.
So what do you tell them?
I feel they are not safety over here.
The school covered the hateful symbols with Israeli flags.
So that's not a hateful symbol. See, that's what's so amazing. Okay, the swastika is a hateful symbol. I agree. Innocent Jews killed just because they're Jewish. Even if you're a guilty Jew, so what? You shouldn't be killed. It's horrible. It was one of the great crimes that humanity has shown itself capable of. But so is the genocide of Palestinians right now. And so the pride is in another hateful symbol. And do you not get the irony? Does nobody understand the irony there? That's why I have a problem when Mamdani calls out. It feels so disproportionate. Yes, it's terrible that the swastikas are bad. They're really bad. I don't like it. I really dislike it greatly. But it's so disproportionate. You call that out, and yet there are Israeli flags, a symbol of hate, a symbol of murder. Talk about triggering. How do you think a Muslim feels? How do you think a Palestinian feels when they see that flag? How do you think they feel when they see that flag in the halls of Congress? But nobody says boo. Even Mamdani doesn't say boo about that. feel so wrong, so disproportionate. And that's why I really have a problem. Together we can unite against murder, against genocide, against hate. But if you simply pretend that one group that is powerful, that is wealthy, that is well-connected, whose co-religionists are committing a genocide, if you present them as the victims and you ignore their victims, something's very, very wrong. I, on balance, am really glad. Look, I didn't like what Mamdani there. I'm very glad he was elected. I think he will be a better mayor for more New Yorkers than Andrew Cuomo could ever be. So I'm glad he won. I really am. Here's someone on the left. I think she is. I've seen her on Jimmy Dore, so I'm not sure how far to the left she really is, but she presents herself as a leftist, Fiorella Isabel, and she's very critical, and I think she's been right in her criticisms of AOC. She doesn't like Mamdani. Laugh out loud, the AOCIA and sad Zionist slop. So she's talking about Mamdani, indicates this is sadly going to be a very quick descent into neo-progressive BS. I hope she's wrong. New York is taken over not by communists, radicals, but by rebranded elite Dems posing as Democratic Socialists. Broadway has poorer and better actors. We'll see. Maybe Fiorella's right. I feel like Mamdani's victory speech on balance suggested she's wrong and that he is going to be fighting for poor, struggling, and working New Yorkers. I hope she's wrong. I hope I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. And of course, she criticizes Mamdani for his posting on X about his lunch with AOC. And yeah, I mean, look, would I prefer he didn't post about AOC? Yeah, because I think she's a phony, fake OC, as I've called her. Fiorella calls her CIAOC. I get it. But look, she's a congresswoman from New York City. And as bad as she might be, she's less bad than most. I mean, that tells you how bad Congress is. As much of a fake as she is, as much as a phony as she is, if we got true leftists in power, she would go over to the left. She doesn't have any, I don't believe, any partisan opposition to the left. She just goes where the way the wind blows. So is Mamdani smart to have lunch with her, to break bread with her? I say yes, he is. I have no problem with this. All right, again, 240-242-5646. There is a real opportunity. The crimes of Israel are so blatant, they're so wrong, they're so evil that we have a real opportunity to build to break down partisan bridges, to build bridges, across partisan divide, to bridge that partisan divide. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry for the struggle there. We have a real opportunity because so many on the right, especially the young Republicans, the Charlie Kirk people, they get how bad Israel is. And they're not hearing from their leaders, except for maybe a few. And those are media people like, MTG, she's elected. But, Tucker, a few others talking about how evil Israel. Nick Fuentes called a Nazi. I think he's made some what are pretty clearly anti-Semitic statements. I'm not going to be a fan of him, but right now, hey, I'll work with you to stop the Israeli genocide. I'll work with anybody to save lives. There is real opportunity to reach out and to bring disenchanted, disaffected Republican voters who find Trump's support for Israel, Trump's tight embrace of Miriam Adelson, they find it absolutely horrible, horrific. And these are people, Democrats, that they were smart, would reach out to. So I got this screenshot here. This is not a video, but I just thought I would show it. This is a very, very popular. I don't think she's even a millennial. Like, what's after millennials? Is there something later? Is that Gen Z? I don't know how that works. Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials. There's something after millennials. So whatever it is, I don't know. So I think that's who Brett Cooper is. She's like 22. So she was born after 2000. She's associated with, I don't know how conservative she is. She's posted some videos that are critical of the trans movement. So I guess to that extent, she's conservative. Look at how many views she has. For this video, that was, I took the screenshot yesterday, over 200,000 views. Tucker and Nick Fuentes, the interview that broke the GOP. So it broke the GOP because they're really going after the Trump's pro-genocide policies. And Brett Cooper saying we got to break. They got to stop it. There's all this pressure on the right from right-wing campus, organizers, protesters, young Republicans. Israel's bad. Stop it. Stop it. Gen Z is after millennials. Thank you, Splash. So this is who, if you were really a leftist, if you really cared about ending genocide, about ending American empire, you would join with these people on this issue. And that's exactly why I'm so critical so often now of Kyle Kulinski, because he's become a partisan hack, a Democratic partisan hack. He talks about the exact same issue that Brett Cooper does, but whereas Cooper says this is Republican policy is bad, we have to stop it. And I'm a Republican, I think she said that. Listen to the way Kulinski in his typically obscene, profane way responds.
Establishment Republicans, first of all, you've made a lot of arguments that are certainly, if not outright Nazi, they are Nazi adjacent. They are very...
So remember what I said is, you shouldn't, I hate when it does that. I should have downloaded this video, so I wouldn't do that. Don't attack people that you want to bring over to your side. But Kulinski is totally captured by his audience. He used to actually sort of be a little bit of a populist, but he's become a pure Democratic shill of late. And his numbers have really jumped up. I mean, he has a huge subscriber base. I think he have over 2 million subscribers. I'm not sure. I don't know if he has as many as Brett Cooper, but he certainly does very, very well for a progressive / Democratic YouTuber. He certainly does. And he calls them Nazis. Now, I think Ted Cruz is a really, really bad guy. But if you're going to go after the Republicans for being Nazis, then you got to say the exact same thing, right? About the Democrats like Josh Gottheimer, about Kamala, about anyone who's just a pure defender of Israel. Don't you have to Schumer, right? I mean, if you're going to call the Republicans for their embrace of Israel Nazis, shouldn't you do the same when it comes to Democrats?
Like, they're pointing people in that direction. And then when some of these people decide, I'm going to go all the way, you're like, how dare you go all the way? Like, I'm sorry, Ben Shapiro. All of your, bigoted arguments over the years, all your warmongering, that points in a fucking Nazi direction.
So they're really bad guys. Look, I can't stand Ben Shapiro. By the way, does he have to be constantly dropping F-bombs? Isn't that a reflection really of a lack of imagination? I think it really does. Now look, you say, hey, Hal, you're jealous. Look at that. He's got the gold and he's got the silver YouTube plaques up and you got a couple of, best of Monterey's on your wall. Yeah, I admit it. I wish I had those plaques. But I also don't really get it. I never got the Kulinski cult.
Somebody came along and just dropped the act and said, I'll go all the way. Sure, I'm a Nazi. That's Nick Fuentes' thing, right? And so, you guys help create this environment that led to this, right? And then
except it's also an environment where, honestly, there's legit criticism where the Republicans are actually questioning, seriously, their leaders, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Again, same names, Massey, Carlson, who are saying, hey, no, these are bad policies. And they're not Nazis. They're not Nazis. I know you cherry picked the Shapiros, who's just really a know-nothing ass, and Fuentes. I get it. But you're ignoring people like, is it Dave Anderson, I believe, who's, libertarian. He's no Nazi. He just is anti-Israel. He's anti-Zionist. He's pro-life in that regard. So you're cherry picking Kulinski because you want to caricature the entire right. Anyone, and they're not even all right, but you caricature those who aren't democratic, who aren't Democrats, caricature them all as Nazi. It's not true.
You guys are so stupid. You're leaving this lane wide open on the right that all it takes is somebody to step in and say, I don't want to fund Israel's genocide in Gaza. I don't want to give them, tens of billions of dollars to murder children with my money in my name. So if somebody comes along on the right and says that, yes, a lot of particularly young right-wingers are going to go, that guy's way more fucking reasonable than Ted Cruz.
So here's where Kulinski just totally, how does he miss this? Sure, there are people on the right who are coming out and saying we shouldn't be supporting Israel. We shouldn't be funding that genocide. We've already mentioned some of their names. I'm sure there will be more. But here's where Kulinski totally misses the boat. That's the lane that Democrats or progressives or leftists should be filling. That's the lane, by the way, that Dr. Jill Stein filled in 24. And you were totally opposed to her candidacy. So you're the biggest phony of all. You're saying, oh, well, the Republicans are so stupid because there could be a pro-peace, anti-Zionist candidate out there. Well, guess what? Why don't you champion that on the left and say to Democrats, reach across the aisle, reach for these people, try to work with them. But you don't do that at all. You just call them Nazis because you're not interested in building coalitions. You're not interested in bridging partisan divides because you're profiting from it. All right. Just want to give you a few quotes to end the program that kind of are consistent with this whole messaging, which is we need to work together. We need to work intra-class. And I think that's what Mamdani's trying to do, even with a few stumbles, even when he brings up anti-Semitism, which isn't a real thing in New York City, except maybe a couple of kooks out there painting swastikas. Here's what Tom wants. I love this quote. I always will center it because I think it's so important. You are kept apart that you may be separately fleeced of your earnings. And by the way, that is what people like Cruz do. That is what people like Shapiro do. Try to pit poor, struggling, working people against each other. That was my biggest beef with Charlie Kirk, more than anything else, is that he was pretty damn good at getting working class and middle income white people to blame trans people, black people, immigrants for their problems, rather than focusing on the real villains, the financial titans, the offshorers, the warmongers. And by the way, that's exactly what Tom Hartman does as well, except the other way around. Oh, it's the fault of those racists, those working class white racists, rather than, no, it's the fault of the leaders of both parties and the billionaire donors to both parties. So, Watson, you're kept apart that you may be separately fleeced of your earnings. You're deceived and blinded that you may not see how this race antagonism perpetuates a monetary system. And again, that's the gold standard where you had deflation, where farmers just couldn't get. Actually, gold standard would be inflation, right? Now, they wanted inflation. They wanted more money. Less money, prices go down because each dollar becomes worth more and more. So a dollar will buy more and more. That's deflation. That was really bad for the farmers who borrowed money, and they would borrow money, and then their crops would be worth less than they had hoped. They would get less dollars for it. It would be harder for them to pay off the loans. So Watson's saying we need easy money. We need to get out off the gold standard. And because of race antagonism, we're not focusing on the prize, which is to have some reasonable inflation so we can get better prices for our goods. for our agricultural products. That was his point. It was a spot on point. And we see it exactly the same thing today. For a more recent quote, Dr. King talking about Jim Crow and making the point that the South was a terrible place for poor whites, no less than it was for blacks. But Jim Crow was a way for the planter class, the aristocrats in the South, and by the way, in the North, to avoid just economic policies. Hey, we'll turn you, we're not going to give you much, but we'll give you one thing, and we'll give you Jim Crow. So that the Southern aristocracy took the world and gave the poor white man Jim Crow. And so when the poor white man's undernourished children cried out for necessities that his low wages could not provide, he showed them Jim Crow signs. And that's Dr. King. So we'll give you something psychological. You're superior to black people. Psychological remedies are going to work unless there's a principled, vibrant opposition that's going to give working people a truly fair deal. And that's why FDR ushered in, because he did fight for that New Deal, which, not perfect, but so much better than what came before, did usher in some degree of justice, some degree of fairness for poor, struggling, and working people. And what was the result? Ultimately, the end of Jim Crow. Because when working white people in the North were able to unionize, were able to get good wages, they were willing to, not all of them, of course, but enough, were willing to support civil rights. If you want true economic justice, if you want peace, then you have to fight for fairness. And that's what Thomas Watson said. That's what certainly Dr. King said. And that's what, for whatever it's worth, Hal Ginsberg says. Finally, let's close. I have one more little story I want to talk about real quick, where I think this is a very, very bad sign for Trump and Trumpism, is this attacks now we're seeing on the military. I think that really is going to, not because I have any love for the military, because I believe in empire, but I think this really reflects a very poor understanding of American history. Hegseth is purging military leaders with little explanation. The moves to fire or sideline generals and admirals are without precedent in recent decades and have rattled the top brass. And in fact, he's firing the brass, the generals, the admirals, even against the advice of other military leaders. Says, hey, these are good soldiers. These are good leaders of men and women. We can't fire them. You can't fire them. And for whatever reason, I think a want of loyalty, maybe they had previously served under General Milley. They had been promoted under Democrats. Their loyalty is in question. For that reason or others, maybe they've supported DEI policies, which I often do support. I think we should be looking under every rock to try to find the best people to be leaders in our military and everywhere else. But that's not going to work under the Hegseth Trump regime. And I think in the end, this is going to be very, very, this could really, really work against Trump and his administration. Because when you think about other demagogues, when they've gone after the military, it hasn't worked out. Americans, for whatever, we have a lot of respect for generals. And I actually do. I mean, it's pretty cool. You got to be a general. You must have, I assume you did, at least you sort of did something, right? I mean, it's not easy to go to West Point. It's not easy to get into West Point and to survive. And that's where most of them went, or the Naval Academy. And then they had to, serve honorably. Now, I'm not going to say they're all great people. A lot of them aren't. But there's something impressive about it. When you go after the military, doesn't often work out well for you. Here's a man, demagogue, in the 1950s for whom attacks on the military were a death knell for him.
Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You've done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?
So that Joseph Welch, Army lawyer, and that statement, important to realize, was when McCarthy was claiming the armed forces were rife with communists. Attacks on Hollywood, attacks on big business, Americans were willing to accept those. But when he went after the army, a military, by the way, that had won World War II, President Ike at that time, no, that was, the Americans drew the line. All right, that's going to do it for me today. Thank you all so much for being part of Halitics. It's really my honor to get to speak to you, to see the comments, to take a moment or an hour of my day and speak to you. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will be back. It should be a Monday with Carlos. I hope we'll have Carlos. Sometimes Carlos can't make. He did make it this past Monday. It was disappointing. I really do want to talk to him about Mamdani's victory. I think he will have some great insights. Thanks to all for commenting. And I see Lauren commenting now. Great to see your comments as well, Lauren. Have a great